Hey, this is Renew Education. Let's look at this case study. This is looking at something I call too many miracles. Maybe that's a little bit overreachy, but the idea is looking at something that seems pretty simple and straightforward and how complicated it kind of gets when you expect a lot of biology. And looking at this helps us look at really what could possibly affect the area of interest. The area of interest are these two teeth, one that has complete blowout of bone from a fractured root canal on this bridge, and the other one is this fresh site here. Now he's looking at the treatment assessment. He's green for most things here. I would say he's got a red on the bone density and red on the facial bone in this particular site only, because he's actually missing the lingual and facial walls of this site because of the big blowout. But otherwise, the nerve, the other things he's green on or light green on. So he looks like a really good candidate at first for implants. But as you'll see, we'll walk through this case a little bit more and how the decision came to be in the end, and I'll save that for last. So let's look at the CT here. So when we look at this site here, let's look at that slice cut here. This is actually very important of this fractured area. This gentleman had left this going for quite some time. And what happened is both walls have just completely collapsed around the fracture because the fracture split down pretty far down into the tooth. It's just floating in soft tissue here. Now, let me put a line here as to where the top of that bone actually is. So here on our panel view, this is actually where the lingual and the facial wall dip down like this. That's pretty far. That's not just a little defect. That's a very large defect, in particular in that particular site. Now, I'm going to jump back to that in a second, but let's look at the number 19 site here and see if we want an implant there as well. And this is the problem, is that this site is so hard that I doubt that to get a long-term successful implant in this site is asking for a miracle here, because the bone is just so hard. Something I haven't really tried that I want to try, maybe he would have been a good candidate for it, but the guy just wants to chew, is to drill the osteotomy first, let it heal for about a month so it's soft bone growing into there, immature bone growing into the site, and maybe even drill it as if you're going to do the size of the implant you're going to do, and maybe one notch bigger. So you now could have hopefully some fresh bone, but softer bone, medullary type bone actually growing in there, because this is super hard. If you put your implant in here with the biomechanics of a number 19 combined, you're asking for a miracle for that to actually stay in. So now you go back to this site and take a look. Okay, so if I graft this, wait 8-10 months for all of that to kind of grow up or try to grow up and not really have a defect there, it's already asking a lot. Now when you try to put an implant here in this extremely hard bone and hoping that that's going to stay, that's asking a lot. So you've got miracles on miracles here that need to happen. So let's go back to this site here, and I want to kind of examine that a little bit more. If we grafted that and we expected that this graft would, let's say, start here, you would have to do some sort of mesh or some sort of hard piece or something to keep the particulate graft or whatever type of graft you're trying to do in this site, because you've got basically two walls here. This is how high the other two walls are. You've got about 8 millimeters to go. So you can hold it this way, of course, because you got mesial distal walls, It's the lingual facial problem where all the graft just wants to spread away and go away from that. So if you do a nice PTFE type of graft material, so what you would basically do is take this out and take some sort of, they have these titanium ribbed type of PTFE or membranes that would probably work very, very well here. And you would open this up, flap this back, clean it out really well, fill it up, apply your matrix, your barrier of choice here to hold that into place, suture that back over the top, and then follow the protocols of the manufacturer of the products that you are using to either, if it's PTFE, you're going to remove the membrane. If you're using a titanium mesh, you're going to remove that eventually too. You're going to be dealing with stuff that's probably not going to be a resorbable membrane in this case. If you had a resorbable membrane, that'd be very interesting to see how that would hold up. But that's how you get this rigged back. But then you still have the problem with this site. And so what are you going to do about this site? You might get the success after about 10 to 12 months for a tooth here, but you may not have the success here. And if you try, and you're thinking longer term, you're not thinking like, okay, initially I can get a crown on it, but you're looking at the biomechanics long term are not good in this site. So he does have the posterior tooth here, and he's got a couple teeth here. So in the end, the patient did side on, instead of spending all the money on this type of grafting and the implant that may not have a long lifespan here, with a little bit too many unknowns and the costs keep creeping up, this patient had decided to go with I don't know if it was a 4 or 5 unit bridge, but he could double a butt here, which would be fine. This is a premolar actually, so it's actually probably a little bigger than you think, but there's a nice big canine here with the root canal. Could probably use some help. So if we were actually to put an implant in that kind of fell into that spot that didn't have any kind of healing, that's about how far it could actually end up, because you got a giant defect. But realistically, you're probably going to get some healing if you do even a basic graft, but you're still very, very far down relative to the bone height of both of these sides. And that's where I'm kind of like, okay, you have to have a lot of success with the graft to bring up that implant up to this side here so that you could be fully successful. So this case, as much as it's dealing with kind of the miracles of biology and the miracles of the materials we actually have available, you're still in this conundrum because of the site that is next door to it, even though this site gets all the attention, and asking this entire area to heal the way you want it and predictably, with the expense, with the time that's involved versus a 2-week, 4 or 5 unit bridge. Patient could get on with quality of life than having no area to chew here for the next year or so for all of that to heal, and then it's still you still have to go day by day and for another year or two to make sure that that's going to be adequate for the loads and everything else that's going into this. So that's how this one played out. It played out into traditional prosthetics, which is fine. I don't have any problems with that. But that's how we assess it here at Renew and make sure that we're looking after the best interest of the patients. And down the road, we'll see how that heals up. This is a fairly new case, so I wouldn't mind looking at this in a year or two if the patient ever comes back. He drove very far to get here, so I have a feeling he has his own general dentist somewhere else to take a look at that. So that's it for this one. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube, and look for our live broadcast streams. We're always doing something fun. All right, thanks.